And then I've just dragged my brush through a clean paper towel just to get most of the paint off. And I've just picked up some of that reddish brown. I don't care too much which colour I put in, but I need to kill this bit of yellow between the red frill and the top of the head. And then there's this little gap here I mentioned in the head, which I need to fill in as well. Just so that hopefully the structure of the animal I'm creating is pretty accurate, so that it's believable as a working mechanism. Now there are some wonderful patches of different types of blue within the feathers, and I'm going to begin to. I quite enjoy enhancing the blues in animals. I do that quite a lot with my cattle paintings. So I'm going to pick up some pure ultramarine blue on a 1/2 inch frayed brush, and as you saw, I just sprayed the surface of the painting with water. Now I've got to be a little bit careful here when I apply this, because if I start mixing the paint too much, it's going to kind of muddy the colour, and that could be advantageous or it could be problematic depending on how it ends up mixing. But nevertheless, what I can do is just again squint at my reference and think, well, okay, well, there's a bit of blue there. And what I'm actually getting as I drag this through the still damp brown is I'm actually getting a little bit of green appearing. And I don't actually mind that, because I have a feeling, I'd have to check the footage to be sure, but on the Poultry Parade's Instagram, there's a little bit of a video clip I saw of Joy kind of shaking herself and the feathers kind of splaying out. And that's in slow motion. I don't know whether it's actually the case. Well, I'm pretty confident there's some iridescence, so some changing of the color with angle as you look at these feathers. So kind of like a pigeon's feathers, they change with color depending on the lighting and the viewing angle. But I can't remember whether there was any green in there. But regardless of whether there was or not, I quite like the way the green is looking on the painting. So what I can do, you see, I can drag through lightly with the tips of the brush, and that will give me some mixing to create some green. But if I want to put down a patch of purer blue within that, I can lay the brush down flat and just gently get a bit more of the pure blue showing up. So we've started to introduce some sense of extra colours within the feathers now. So continuing with the same brush, and again I've kept the surface of the painting moist, but now I've switched to pure tinting white, because again there's a lot of white in the feathers as well. But it's very much, this is a speckled Sussex hen, I believe, and as the name implies, there's a lot of speckling in the patterning, and that's a huge amount to try and capture every single speckle, as it were, would perhaps take a lifetime. But with a bit of wet in wet and just applying the brush in different ways, we can begin to suggest that patterning. And what I plan to do later in the painting is I will let all of this paint dry completely, and then later on I'll switch to using titanium white, and that will allow me to enhance the brightness of some of these colours, perhaps the blues and some of the coppery browns, and indeed some of the whites that I'm putting down now. But for the most part, what I'm doing is, again, squinting at my reference and just trying to see where the white is appearing. But I'm not trying to make that white too brilliant. I just want to suggest some patterning and not have it detract too much from the tonal work that I've done already. again, in much the same way as I applied the blue, by controlling the angle of the brush and the loading of the paint on the brush, I can put down opaque patches of white or more translucent patches of white which mix in. But again, if I'm putting down a big patch of white, I'm keeping in mind the direction in which the feathers are falling. And in other cases, there are these little sort of crescent shapes, which I will do some of them in more detail later, but for now I can just generally hint at the overall shape. And I'll take some of that white and mix it in with the pale pink. Just put a bit of that on the leg. So while that part of the painting is drying, I want to add a little bit of green to the ground here, a little bit of grass. So I'm just going to take some of the yellow and mix that into the very pale brown that I had from earlier on. We'll add a little bit of the ultramarine blue, and we'll just begin by putting a patch of, let's just get the painting a bit wetter there, and we'll just put a little bit of this colour in here. And we'll also pop in some over there as well. So I intend to keep the treatment of this area pretty loose and fairly light in touch, hopefully, because when the painting's done and dusted, obviously I want people to be looking at the hen, not a depiction of the grass. But the main reason I'm putting this colour in is to, in part, make the legs stand out more here from the background. And also I want to put in the cast shadow, or at least some hint of it that's in the reference. And cast shadows in general are pretty important in paintings, I think, because they really do help create the illusion that the thing you're drawing is occupying a space, a three-dimensional space. So in this case, that this animal is walking across the ground. So let's try and create that shadow now. So I've already got this kind of dark purplish colour that I used earlier, and I'm going to mix that in with some of the blue and then pop that into some of the green here, and let's see how well that works. So the cast shadow starts off under the leg there, kind of dips down a little bit, comes up, and then kind of wriggles across the ground. And then continues up here. Let's get a bit more water on the painting, because I don't, while I need this to be fairly dark, I don't want it to be just one-dimensional, a solid lump of dark tone. It's nice to have some texture and variation of colour within the shadows. So the wet in wet that I'm using here is going to automatically create some of that for me. And for now, I think that's all I'll do for that. Well, actually, having said that, let's put a little bit, add a little bit more blue to that. And we'll add bit of shadow around the feet here, a bit there as well. But for now, that's all I'll do, I think. So I'm going to let that painting dry completely now.